Rita, I want to finish off by talking a bit of America, including the latest silver bullet that the media is ready to fire in Donald Trump's direction. Is a bloke who, is a neocon, way more hawkish and over-the-top hawkish than I am about getting involved in wars that they don't need to start. He was the National Security Advisor. He claims that he heard something and was told something when it came to aid, all of which means nothing. The President of the United States is the one who can, on his own, decide foreign policy. He doesn't have to check with the committee. He's the one who decides. But they're all very, very excited. Here's a look back at what happened today. The latest silver bullet to bring down Trump. Every other one hit the back wall.
Well, I take Ambassador Bolton and his team at their word that they didn't leak it. But look, sending something so sensitive to the White House during an impeachment hearing and all the bureaucrats that would review it, I'm afraid it was an invitation for a leak. There's a report now that there were many paper copies made in the National Security Council. If that's true, heads should roll on the NSC. This should have been very carefully. Look, that doesn't excuse the decision to send it to the NSC at all.
Yeah, but
so let me explain who that person was. I apologise for not setting up properly. At one point, he was the Chief of Staff to John Bolton, who was working in that position. And he's talking about, well, hang on, how did this thing get out? Now, this is the whole thing. John Bolton knows that he can't just go and do an interview because executive privilege would mean he can't just open his mouth. The reason he probably won't end up giving evidence, certainly anytime soon, in the Senate if that decision is made, is because there's a whole court process to work out where the presidential advisors are allowed to talk about the advice they give to a president or what the president says behind closed doors. So what's the way around it? You write the book and you shove it into a very leaky system that, surprise, surprise, goes back to the well-trodden path that they did with Mueller, that they did with Daniels, that they did with Cohen, that they've done how many times now?
Comey was leaking through the back door.
It's all vague, it's all sources who've seen people, but no actual quotes here. So I'll ask you this one. How close will this silver bullet get to the president?
Well, Trump made a big mistake getting Bolton involved. He's a neocon, one of those responsible for the disaster in Iraq. So, Trump was always against that disaster. Why bring this guy on staff as the National Security Advisor? So Trump's got many strengths, but I'm afraid picking the right people for the right job, particularly in the White House, has been a real weakness of his, and it rebounds every time. So, I don't think you can rely on Bolton because his track record is so bad. He's a vengeful type, and obviously this has been put out to coincide with the impeachment trial in the Senate. Trump's not going to get done there. He's got the numbers there, and with good reason. So I don't think it'll make a hell of a big difference. It'll just be one of those added up to the gotcha Trump moments that turned out to be nothing.
Well, it's this thing where, Cory, whatever, we all know I'm on the Trump train. The worries are all gone, no question about it, right? Especially in part because of what I said at the start of the show. This has happened how many times? Where it's all very well timed, it's very well and you drop it to the straight news organisation, and then just repeats around the echo chamber of cable news, which then justifies their version of the 6 p.m. news, etc., etc., etc. And then we must investigate, and it goes on and on and on for days. Well, every single time it results in exactly the same thing. But there is something to be said about how coordinated and vengeful this stuff is, where they are literally arguing their case before the Senate while they are trying to argue a public opinion thing, which in many ways is an admission that what they're trying to do in the Senate is nothing to do with booting him from office. Instead, it's about flipping half a dozen Senate seats.
See, I think you're getting closer to the mark there, Paul, because I don't think this has got anything to do with the impeachment, quite frankly. This is a book pre-launch sales campaign. That's what it's all about. He's trying to sell 1 million books and justify this massive advance, I presume. Even Nancy Pelosi doesn't think Trump's going to get impeached on this flimsy evidence that he said, hang on, until we get to the bottom of this alleged corruption, we're not going to give foreign aid. Gee, if a government didn't do that or a president didn't do that to get to the bottom of things, you'd be wondering why they're wasting, $1 billion or more. And let's not forget, once again, Joe Biden, the former Deputy President of the United States, admitted that he did exactly the same thing, but he did it to call off the dogs investigating his own kid's company. Now that smells a little bit like corruption to me.
Well, also, to give you an idea of John Bolton and how Democrats absolutely changed their tune on him, he was appointed by George W. Bush to be the ambassador to the UN. Now, the process in the United States is to get appointed to something like that, there has to be a vote in the Senate. But Republicans were in the minority, Democrats were in the majority, and they held up his appointment. They wouldn't sign off on him to be America's ambassador to the UN because he was this sort of, pro-war guy. So George W. Bush put him into the job in a recess appointment, which means you fill the job but you don't really get the business card. But now they're going to turn around and pretend 100%, we're all in, this is a vital person we need to hear from. So simultaneously, so terrible he can't represent the country, but we've got to get him on the front line because he'll do Trump in. Finally here, Rita, you get to talk about Hillary Clinton, who is trolling us all yet again, reminding us that she still exists. She's doing interviews for an upcoming reality show that unsurprisingly concludes, she's awesome. Where she has said she might still run, even though Iowa is 1 week away.
Oh, fingers crossed, I tell you. I would pay good money for her to run because it would just be delicious if we just have a repeat of 2016. And the Democratic candidates are that bloody weak that she has every chance if she puts her hand up again. She's a disaster zone, but look at what they've got. It really is. There is nothing there. Every single candidate is damaged, and I don't know. I've got my fingers crossed that we're going to get another Hillary run.
What's the reality show?
Well, is that apparently there was sort of a little docu-series that was done for Hulu, one of the streaming services, that followed her around for a little while.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
So, unsurprisingly, it'll get a big tick.
I'll be watching paint dry.
And this is what she said. This is what she said to Variety magazine.
I know that you're not running, but do you ever feel the urge that I could beat him if I were, or I wish
Yeah, I certainly feel the urge because I feel like the 2016 election was really an odd time and an odd outcome, and the more we learn, the more that seems to be the case.
Oh, poor Bill. Imagine the bitterness all day, every day, the yelling at the telly, the could have been champions of the ultimate could have been champion. But when you come to the Democrat field, what have you got? A couple of lefties, couple of nobodies and a pair of dentures. Good luck with that in going up against Trump and his roaring economy.